The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. As Olivia Owens ran for her life, the sound of her father's threats still ringing in her ears. It was 1878, and at 22, she had just committed the unforgivable sin of refusing to marry Harold Blackburn, the wealthiest cattle baron in the territory and her father's ticket to financial salvation. "You ungrateful child," her father had roared, his face contorted with rage. "After everything we've done for you." He had grabbed her arm so tightly she knew it would bruise, but Olivia had wrenched free, grabbing only her mother's locket and what little money she had saved before fleeing the only home she'd ever known. Now, as she stumbled down the darkening street with nothing but the clothes on her back, Olivia had no idea where to go. The boarding house wouldn't take her not after word got around that James Owens had disowned his only daughter. No respectable establishment would offer shelter to a woman cast out by her family. The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over as she slowed her pace, reality setting in. She was alone, with night falling and nowhere to go. Her chest heaved with sobs as she leaned against the rough wooden post outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, a place proper ladies were never supposed to enter. "You all right, miss?" The deep voice startled her, and Olivia spun around to face a tall figure silhouetted against the golden light spilling from the saloon doors. She quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a state. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice betraying her. The man stepped forward, and Olivia could finally see him clearly. He wore the dust of the trail on his clothes, a well-worn Stetson pushed back on his head, revealing tousled dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to see right through her pretense. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way that made her heart skip despite her circumstances. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine," he said, his voice gentle as he kept a respectful distance. "Is there someone I can fetch for you? Family, perhaps?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "My family is the very reason I'm standing here with nowhere to go," the stranger's brow furrowed with concern. "I'm Riley Donovan," he said, tipping his hat. "Just rode into town looking for work." "Olivia Owens," she replied automatically, then realized her mistake. "Though I doubt I'll be an Owens for much longer, given that my father has just informed the entire town that he no longer has a daughter." Riley studied her for a long moment. "Would I be overstepping if I asked what happened?" Olivia sighed, too exhausted to maintain propriety with a stranger when her whole life had just fallen apart. "I refused to marry Harold Blackburn. Father arranged everything without even consulting me, and when I said no, well," she gestured helplessly at herself, "here I am." Riley's expression darkened. "Blackburn, the cattle baron, he's old enough to be your father." "Precisely one of my many objections," Olivia said with a weak smile. "Unfortunately, father cares more about Blackburn's money than my happiness." Just then, the saloon doors swung open, and a group of rowdy cowboys emerged, their loud voices making Olivia flinch. They noticed her immediately, and their expressions turned predatory. "Well, look what we have here," one of them slurred, taking a step toward her. Before Olivia could react, Riley moved between her and the men, his stance casual but his presence unmistakably protective. "Evening, gentlemen," he said coolly. "The lady and I were just having a conversation." "Doesn't look like no lady to me," another cowboy sneered. "Ladies ain't out alone after dark." "Then perhaps you need your eyes checked," Riley replied, his voice hardening. "Move along now." Something in his tone made the cowboys reconsider. They muttered curses but continued down the street, shooting dark glances over their shoulders. When they were gone, Riley turned back to Olivia. "Do you have anywhere to go tonight? Any friends who might take you in?" Olivia shook her head miserably. "Everyone I know will side with my father. He's an influential man in this town." Riley seemed to be weighing something in his mind. Finally, he said, "There's a widow named Mrs. Caldwell who runs a boarding house on the edge of town. She doesn't care much for town gossip and might give you a room for the night." "I have very little money," Olivia admitted. "Let me help you," Riley offered. "I can't in good conscience leave you out here alone." Olivia hesitated. Years of being told never to trust strangers, especially men, making her wary. but there was something about Riley Donovan that put her at ease, a steadiness in his gaze that spoke of honor. "Why would you help me?" she asked softly. Riley's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Because it's what decent folk do, Miss Owens, and because I know what it's like to be alone with nowhere to turn." Before she could respond, a commotion from down the street caught their attention. James Owens, accompanied by two of Blackburn's men, was marching toward them, his face a mask of fury. "There she is," her father shouted. "Olivia, you come back home this instant." Riley glanced at Olivia, noting the terror that flashed across her face. Without hesitation, he took her hand. "Run," he whispered, and they bolted down a narrow alley between buildings. They raced through the darkness, Olivia lifting her skirts to keep pace with Riley's long strides. Behind them, she could hear her father's angry shouts and the heavy footsteps of their pursuers. Riley led her through a maze of back alleys until they emerged near a small stable at the town's edge. A sturdy buckskin horse nickered softly as they approached. "This is Copper," Riley said quickly as he untied the horse. "Can you ride?" Olivia nodded. "Since I was a child." In one fluid motion, Riley swung up into the saddle and extended his hand. Olivia took it without hesitation, allowing him to pull her up behind him. "Hold tight," he instructed, and she wrapped her arms around his waist just as Copper lunged forward. They thundered out of town, the darkness swallowing them as they headed toward the vast Wyoming wilderness. Olivia knew she should be terrified. She'd just fled her home with a man she'd known for less than an hour, but instead, she felt an exhilarating sense of freedom. After they'd put several miles between themselves and Medicine Bow, Riley slowed Copper to a walk. "There's a line shack about an hour's ride from here," he said over his shoulder. "We can stay there tonight, and tomorrow we can figure out what to do." "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked again, still unable to believe a stranger would risk so much for her. Riley was quiet for a moment. "I've seen what happens to women forced into marriages they don't want," he finally said, his voice low. "My sister." He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Let's just say I couldn't stand by and watch it happen to you." They rode in silence after that, the vast starry sky spreading above them like a canopy of diamonds. Olivia was acutely aware of the strong back she leaned against, the steady rhythm of Riley's breathing, the warmth of him contrasting with the cool night air. The line shack appeared as a dark silhouette against the night sky, a simple one-room structure used by cowboys during roundup. Riley helped Olivia dismount, his hand steady at her waist, then took care of Copper before leading her inside. The interior was spare but clean: a small stove, a rough-hewn table with two chairs, and a narrow bed against one wall. Riley quickly lit a lantern, casting the room in a warm glow. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it's dry and safe." Olivia looked around, overwhelmed by the events of the evening. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "This morning I woke up in my bed and now." "Now you're free," Riley finished for her, his eyes gentle. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you made your choice. That takes courage, Miss Owens." "Olivia, please," she said. "After everything that's happened, I think formalities seem rather pointless." Riley smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made something flutter in Olivia's chest. "Olivia it is, then." He busied himself starting a fire in the small stove while Olivia sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion suddenly hitting her like a physical weight. "You should take the bed," Riley said when he noticed her drooping eyelids. "I'll sleep on the floor." Olivia wanted to protest, but she was too tired to argue. She removed her boots and outer jacket, then lay down on the narrow bed, pulling the rough woolen blanket over herself. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard Riley moving quietly around the cabin, the sound somehow comforting rather than threatening. "Riley," she murmured, her eyes already closed. "Yes, thank you." "Get some sleep, Olivia," he replied softly. "Tomorrow's a new day." And with that reassurance, she surrendered to exhaustion, her last conscious thought that despite everything that had happened, she felt safer with this stranger than she had in her own home for a very long time. Dawn broke in pale streaks of pink and gold across the Wyoming sky as Olivia stirred from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind, the unfamiliar ceiling above her, the rough blanket, the scent of coffee and wood smoke. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up abruptly. Riley was already awake, tending to a small fire in the stove. He looked up when she moved, a tentative smile crossing his face. "Morning," he said. "Hope you slept well." Olivia pushed her tangled hair from her face, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "Better than I expected, thank you." He handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "It's not fancy, but it's hot." She took it gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. "What happens now?" she asked after taking a sip. Riley sat down across from her, his own coffee cupped between his hands. "That depends on what you want, Olivia. We could try to find you passage on the eastbound train. You might have family elsewhere who would take you in." Olivia shook her head. "My mother's family disowned her when she married my father, and he has no siblings. There's no one. What about friends in another town? No one who wouldn't send word back to my father immediately." She stared into her coffee, the reality of her situation sinking in. "I have nowhere to go." Riley was quiet for a moment, contemplating. "What can you do? I mean, what skills do you have?" Olivia considered the question. "I can read and write well. I kept my father's books for his mercantile. I can sew, cook reasonably well, the usual accomplishments expected of a merchant's daughter." She paused, then added, "I'm a quick learner. There's a town about 2 days' ride from here, Silver Creek. It's small but growing. They might need someone to help at the school or the general store." He hesitated, then added, "I was heading there anyway. I have a friend who offered me work on his ranch." Hope fluttered in Olivia's chest. "Do you think they'd hire me?" Even without references, Riley's smile was warm. "Silver Creek isn't like Medicine Bow. People there judge you by what you do, not who your family is or what rumors follow you." "You know it well, then. Spent some time there a few years back. Good people for the most part." He drained his coffee and set the cup aside. "If you want, I can take you there. No obligation. Once you're settled, I'll be on my way." Olivia studied him, this man who had risked himself to help her. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly, the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar near his jaw, the gentle way he handled everything from his horse to the coffee pot. There was a kindness to him that seemed at odds with his obvious strength. "Why would you do that for me?" she asked, not for the first time. Riley looked out the small window for a long moment. "My sister, Rebecca," he finally said, his voice tight with emotion, "was forced to marry a man twice her age when she was just 18. Our parents died in a cholera outbreak, and our uncle arranged it, said it was the only way to secure her future." His jaw clenched. "The man beat her. By the time I found out and came for her, she was broken somehow. She died in childbirth a year later." Olivia's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Riley." He met her eyes again, his gaze intense. "I couldn't help her then, but I can help you now." "Then I accept your offer," Olivia said softly, "and I'm more grateful than I can express." They set out within the hour, Riley having packed the few supplies from the lined shack. Olivia rode behind him again, the closeness less awkward now, almost comfortable. As they put more distance between themselves and Medicine Bow, she felt the invisible chains of her former life loosening. The Wyoming landscape stretched around them, vast and beautiful rolling hills giving way to rugged mountains in the distance, the sky an endless blue canopy above. They stopped at midday to rest copper and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. "Tell me about Silver Creek," Olivia said as they sat in the shade of a lone cottonwood. "What's it like?" Riley leaned back against the tree trunk. "It started as a mining town, but when the silver petered out, it became ranching country. It's in a beautiful valley with a creek running right through the center of town, hence the name. There's a church, a schoolhouse, a couple of saloons, a hotel, and a general store. About 300 people, I'd say. And your friend's ranch, the Double D, Dave Daniels runs it. We rode together for a while, working cattle drives from Texas. He was lucky enough to win his spread in a poker game about 5 years back." Riley chuckled. "Dave always did have luck with cards." "What will you do there?" "Whatever needs doing. I'm handy with horses, and Dave's expanding his herd. He needs good men who know cattle." Riley gave her a sidelong glance. "What about you? What would you want to do in Silver Creek if you had your choice?" Olivia considered the question seriously. I've always loved books. Working in a library or a school would be wonderful. She smiled ruefully. Though at this point, I'd be grateful for any honest work. The school teacher in Silver Creek was looking to retire last I heard, Riley said. She must be pushing 70 by now. And Mrs. Henderson at the general store always complained about needing help with her ledgers. Hope blossomed in Olivia's chest. Perhaps this disaster could become an opportunity after all. They continued their journey as the afternoon waned, making camp that evening beside a small stream. Riley built a fire and produced a rabbit he'd shot earlier, preparing it with the efficiency of a man accustomed to feeding himself on the trail. As they ate their surprisingly tasty meal, Olivia found herself watching Riley's hands, strong, capable hands that moved with purpose and precision. She blushed when she realized he had caught her staring. "Sorry," she murmured. "I was just thinking how different you are from Harold Blackburn." Riley raised an eyebrow. "I should hope so. The man's old enough to be your father, as you said." "It wasn't just his age," Olivia explained. "It was everything about him, the way he looked at me, like I was a prized heifer he was considering purchasing. The way he spoke about me to my father as if I wasn't even in the room." She shuddered. "His hands were soft. He'd never done a day's real work in his life." "And that bothered you, his soft hands?" Olivia nodded, surprised at her own honesty. "I've always admired people who work hard, who create things or care for things with their hands." She glanced at Riley's hands again. "Like you do." A flush crept up Riley's neck, and he busied himself adding wood to the fire. "I'm just a cowboy, Olivia, nothing special about that." "I disagree," she said quietly. "There's honor in what you do, in how you live." Their eyes met across the fire, and something electric passed between them, a connection that made Olivia's breath catch. Riley was the first to look away, clearing his throat. "We should get some sleep," he said, his voice rougher than before. "We've got another long day tomorrow." He offered Olivia his bedroll, insisting on using only his saddle and blanket for himself despite her protests. As she lay looking up at the stars, listening to the soft sounds of the night and Riley's steady breathing a few feet away, Olivia realized she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The second day of their journey passed much like the first, though Olivia found herself growing more comfortable with Riley. He was easy to talk to, a good listener who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, a novelty for a woman who had spent her life being told what to think by her father. They shared stories as they rode, Riley telling her about his years on cattle drives, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. Olivia recounting her more sheltered life in Medicine Bow, her love of books, her dreams of seeing more of the world than just Wyoming territory. "I used to climb up to the mercantile roof with my favorite novels," she confessed, "and imagine I was sailing the high seas or exploring uncharted wilderness instead of stuck in the same dusty town my whole life." "What were your favorite books?" Riley asked, genuinely curious. "Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, adventure stories like Robinson Crusoe, anything that took me somewhere else, showed me different lives." She sighed. "My father thought reading novels would give me unsuitable ideas. He wasn't entirely wrong, I suppose," Riley chuckled. "I'd say those unsuitable ideas saved you from a miserable marriage." "Yes," Olivia agreed, resting her cheek briefly against his back. "I suppose they did." By mid-afternoon of the third day, they crested a hill, and the valley of Silver Creek spread before them, a picturesque settlement nestled between gentle slopes, with the glittering ribbon of the creek winding through it. Neat wooden buildings lined the main street, with houses and small farms scattered around the periphery. In the distance, larger ranches dotted the landscape. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. "Welcome to Silver Creek," Riley said, a note of pride in his voice as if showing off something precious. "Population 302 now that you're here." They rode down the hill toward the town, Copper picking up his pace as if sensing the end of the journey. As they approached the main street, people nodded greetings to Riley, some calling out welcomes or waving. "You're well known here," Olivia observed. "It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone." He guided Copper toward a modest two-story building with a sign reading Silver Creek Hotel and Restaurant. We should get you a room. You'll want to wash up and rest after our journey." The realization that they would soon part ways hit Olivia with unexpected force. She had grown accustomed to Riley's presence, his steady reliability, his quiet strength. The prospect of facing this new town alone suddenly seemed daunting. As if sensing her thoughts, Riley added, "I'll introduce you to some folks who might help you find work before I head out to the Double D." They dismounted outside the hotel, and Riley tied Copper to the hitching post. A plump, cheerful woman with silver-streaked dark hair emerged from the hotel, her face lighting up at the sight of Riley Donovan, "As I live and breathe." She hurried down the steps to embrace him, then stepped back to look him over. "Still as handsome as ever, I see, though a bit too lean for my liking. Don't they feed you on those cattle drives?" Riley laughed, removing his hat. "Mrs. Garcia, you're a sight for sore eyes." "And yes, they feed me plenty, though nothing compares to your cooking." Mrs. Garcia beamed, then turned curious eyes to Olivia. "And who might this lovely young lady be?" "This is Miss Olivia Owens," Riley said. "Olivia, this is Elena Garcia, the finest cook in 3 territories and owner of the best hotel in Silver Creek." "The only hotel in Silver Creek, you charmer," Mrs. Garcia corrected with a laugh, extending her hand to Olivia. "Welcome to our little town, Miss Owens." "Thank you," Olivia replied, immediately warming to the woman's friendly manner. "I'm very pleased to be here." "Miss Owens needs a room," Riley explained. "She's looking to start fresh in Silver Creek, maybe find work as a teacher or shopkeeper." Mrs. Garcia's eyes lit up. "Is that so?" "Well, you've come at just the right time. Our schoolmarm, Mrs. Winters, announced last month she's retiring come Christmas, and Hank at the general store was just saying yesterday he needs someone with a head for figures." She looked Olivia over appraisingly. "Can you read and cipher, dear?" "Very well," Olivia assured her. "I kept all the books for my father's mercantile in Medicine Bow." "Perfect," Mrs. Garcia clapped her hands together. "You rest up today, and tomorrow I'll introduce you around town. We're always happy to welcome new faces, especially capable young women." "There's a shortage of those out here." Relief washed over Olivia. Perhaps this new start wouldn't be as difficult as she'd feared. Mrs. Garcia showed Olivia to a clean, comfortable room on the 2nd floor of the hotel. "Bathrooms down the hall," she explained. "I'll have hot water brought up so you can wash. Dinner's at 6 in the dining room." When Mrs. Garcia left, Olivia sank onto the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. Everything had happened so quickly, from being cast out by her father to finding herself in a strange town with nothing but the clothes on her back. The enormity of what she'd done, the bridges she'd burned, hit her all at once, and tears welled in her eyes. A gentle knock at the door made her hurriedly wipe her cheeks. "Yes," Riley stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncertain. "Just wanted to make sure you were settled and all right." Olivia tried to smile, but her lip trembled. "I'm fine, it's all suddenly very real." Riley stepped into the room, concern etched on his face. "Having second thoughts?" "No," she said firmly, surprising herself with her certainty. "Not at all, I'm just a bit overwhelmed." He nodded in understanding. "That's natural. You've been through a lot these past few days." He hesitated, then added, "I was thinking I'd head out to the Double D tomorrow morning. Dave's expecting me, but I wanted to make sure you'll be all right before I go." The prospect of Riley leaving so soon sent a pang through Olivia's chest that she wasn't prepared for. In just 3 days, he had become her anchor in a sea of uncertainty. "Mrs. Garcia seems very kind," she said, trying to hide her dismay. "I'm sure I'll manage." Riley studied her face, seeming to read more than she wanted to reveal. "How about this? I'll come back to town in a few days to check on you, make sure you're settling in all right." Relief flooded through her. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said with a small smile, "but I'd like to if that's all right with you." Their eyes met, and that same connection she'd felt by the campfire flared between them. Olivia found herself noticing details she hadn't before: the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, the way one corner of his mouth lifted slightly higher than the other when he smiled, the clean scent of him beneath the dust of the trail. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. They stood in silence for a moment, something unspoken hovering in the air between them. Finally, Riley cleared his throat and took a step back. "I should let you rest," he said. I'll see you at dinner. After he left, Olivia sat by the window, watching the activity on Silver Creek's main street. People went about their business, a mother and child leaving the general store, a group of cowboys emerging from the saloon, a wagon loaded with supplies rumbling past. Normal, everyday life that continued regardless of her personal upheaval. She found comfort in that normalcy, in the thought that she could build a place for herself in this town, become part of its rhythms and routines. And perhaps, a small voice whispered in her mind, build something more with the quiet cowboy who had risked everything to help her. Dinner in the hotel's dining room was a livelier affair than Olivia had expected. News of a new arrival had spread quickly, and several townspeople had conveniently found reasons to dine at Mrs. Garcia's that evening. Olivia was introduced to so many people she could hardly keep their names straight: the mayor and his wife, the town doctor, the banker, the blacksmith, and various ranchers and merchants. To her surprise, no one asked probing questions about her past or why she had come to Silver Creek alone. They seemed to accept Riley's simple explanation that she was looking for a fresh start, and their welcome was genuine. Folks here understand starting over, Riley explained when they finally had a moment alone after dinner. They had stepped outside onto the hotel's front porch to escape the heat and noise of the dining room. Most everyone in Silver Creek came from somewhere else, looking for a second chance. Including you? Olivia asked, leaning against the porch railing beside him. Riley nodded, his profile illuminated by the soft glow from the hotel windows. After my sister died, I couldn't stay in Texas, too many memories. I drifted for a while, working cattle drives, taking odd jobs. Silver Creek was just another stop, but something about it felt, I don't know, possible. Possible? Olivia repeated, understanding exactly what he meant. Yes, that's it exactly. This place feels possible. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely howl echoing across the valley. I should go, Riley finally said, turning to face her. Early start tomorrow. Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that tugged at her. Thank you, Riley, for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there that night. You'd have found your way, he said with a certainty that warmed her. You're stronger than you know, Olivia Owens. Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek, a brief touch that nonetheless sent a current through her. Goodbye, Riley, ride safely. He looked momentarily stunned, then recovered with a smile. Not goodbye, I'll be back in a few days, remember, to check on you. I'll hold you to that promise, she said. After Riley left, Olivia remained on the porch for a long time, watching the quiet streets of Silver Creek and pondering the strange turns her life had taken. 4 days ago, she had been Olivia Owens, dutiful daughter and soon-to-be unwilling bride. Now she was just Olivia, a woman on her own for the first time, in a town where no one knew her past or had expectations for her future. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. True to Mrs. Garcia's word, the following day was filled with introductions and opportunities. The hotel owner took Olivia to meet Hank Miller, the owner of the general store, who hired her on the spot when she demonstrated her skill with bookkeeping. She would work mornings at the store, keeping the ledgers and helping customers. In the afternoon, Mrs. Garcia introduced her to Mrs. Winters, the elderly schoolteacher. The white-haired woman peered at Olivia through thick spectacles, asking sharp questions about her education and experience. I've taught these children for 37 years, Mrs. Winters declared. I won't hand them over to just anyone. They deserve the best. I understand, Olivia assured her. I've never formally taught, but I helped younger children with their lessons in Medicine Bow, and I've always loved learning. Mrs. Winters nodded thoughtfully. You'll assist me until Christmas. If you prove capable, the position is yours when I retire. The school board has already approved the arrangement, assuming I find someone suitable. By the end of her first week in Silver Creek, Olivia had secured both jobs, found a small room to rent in a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Palmer, and begun to make friends among the townspeople. Everyone had been kind and welcoming, particularly after Mrs. Garcia vouched for her character. The only cloud on her horizon was that Riley hadn't returned as promised. Each day, she found herself watching the road that led to the Double D Ranch, hoping to see a familiar figure on a buckskin horse. Each day, her disappointment grew when he didn't appear. "He's probably just busy," Mrs. Garcia assured her when she noticed Olivia's frequent glances toward the road. Spring roundup is a demanding time on a cattle ranch. Every hand is needed from dawn till dusk. Olivia nodded, trying not to show how much Riley's absence affected her. It was foolish, she knew, to have formed such an attachment to a man she'd known for mere days. And yet, she couldn't deny the connection she'd felt with him, or the way her heart lifted at the thought of seeing him again. On the 10th day after her arrival in Silver Creek, Olivia was arranging a display of fabric in the general store when the bell over the door jangled. She looked up and her heart skipped a beat as Riley Donovan walked in, looking tired but satisfied, his skin bronzed even darker by days working in the sun. He stopped short when he saw her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Miss Owens," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I see you found your place in Silver Creek already." Olivia wanted to rush to him, to express how glad she was to see him, but she was acutely aware of Hank Miller watching from behind the counter and Mrs. Henderson selecting items nearby. "Mr. Donovan," she replied with a formality that belied the racing of her heart. "Yes, Mr. Miller has been kind enough to employ me. And she's teaching with old Mrs. Winters too," Hank called from the counter. "Town's mighty pleased with your recommendation, Donovan." "Miss Owens here is a godsend with those ledgers." Riley's smile widened. "I had a feeling she'd be an asset to Silver Creek." He moved closer to Olivia, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry it took so long to get back to town. Roundup was more complicated than expected. One of the hands broke his leg and we were short-handed." "You don't owe me an explanation," Olivia said, though she was warmed by his concern. "Maybe not, but I gave my word I'd check on you, and I'm a man who keeps his promises." His eyes held hers, sincere and warm. "Are you truly all right, Olivia?" The genuine care in his voice touched something deep within her. "Yes," she assured him. "Better than all right. Everyone has been so kind and the work is satisfying. I'm happy here." Relief visibly washed over him. "Good, that's good." "Are you staying in town long?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Just tonight. Dave needs all hands back at the ranch tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "I thought maybe we could have dinner together, catch up properly." Joy bubbled through Olivia. "I'd like that very much." "I'll come by the boarding house at 6 if that suits you." "It does," she said, already anticipating the evening. The afternoon crawled by as Olivia helped customers and organized inventory, her mind constantly drifting to the dinner ahead. When she finally closed up the store, she hurried to the boarding house to prepare, wishing for the first time that she had more than the 2 dresses she'd managed to purchase with her first week's wages. She settled on the blue calico, which Mrs. Palmer had assured her brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her hair more carefully than usual, securing it with her mother's silver hairpins, the only items of value she'd brought from her old life. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock came at the front door. Mrs. Palmer answered it, and Olivia heard the murmur of voices before the older woman called up the stairs. "Miss Owens, you have a caller." Olivia descended the stairs, her heart fluttering when she saw Riley waiting in the small parlor. He had cleaned up, his dark hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt and his best jeans. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously as she approached. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his admiration evident in his eyes. "Thank you," Olivia replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look very handsome yourself." Mrs. Palmer observed them with an approving smile. "Be back by 10, Miss Owens," she reminded gently. "House rules." "Yes, madam," Olivia assured her. Riley offered his arm, and Olivia took it, hyper-aware of the solid strength beneath her fingertips as he escorted her from the boarding house. "I thought we'd try the hotel restaurant," he said as they walked down the lamp-lit street. "Mrs. Garcia promised to save us a quiet table." The evening that followed was one Olivia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The food was delicious, but it was the conversation that made the dinner special. They talked for hours, sharing stories and thoughts, discovering shared interests and values. Riley told her about growing up on a small farm in Texas, his years working cattle drives across the West, his dreams of someday having land of his own. "Dave's offered to sell me a parcel of the Double D when I've saved enough," he explained, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "It's good grazing land with a year-round spring. I could run a decent herd there, build a proper home." "That sounds wonderful," Olivia said, genuinely happy for him. "How long do you think it will take to save enough? Another year, maybe 2 if cattle prices drop." He looked at her intently. "What about you, Olivia? What are your dreams now that you're free to pursue them?" The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on survival, on establishing herself in Silver Creek, that she hadn't thought much beyond immediate needs. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Teaching gives me great satisfaction, and I enjoy the work at the store. Perhaps someday I could have a little place of my own, a garden." She trailed off, realizing how modest her ambitions sounded compared to his, but Riley was nodding as if he understood completely. "A place where you make the decisions, where you answer to no one but yourself." "Yes," she said, surprised and pleased by his perception. "Exactly that." As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself drawn more and more to this quiet, thoughtful man. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and valued her opinions. He had a dry wit that made her laugh and a gentleness that made her feel safe. And when he looked at her, she felt truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. All too soon, the mantel clock in the hotel lobby chimed 10:15, and Riley reluctantly stood. "I should get you back to the boarding house before Mrs. Palmer locks the door on us." The walk back was slower than necessary, both of them seemingly reluctant for the evening to end. When they reached the boarding house, they stood on the porch, the warm summer night wrapped around them like a blanket. "When will you come to town again?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Riley reached out, tentatively taking her hand in his. "Soon," he promised. "Very soon." "There's a dance at the community hall next Saturday. Would you save me a dance?" Olivia smiled, her heart light with happiness. "I'll save you all of them if you like." His eyes darkened at her words, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers up her spine. "Good night, Olivia Owens," he said softly. "Dream sweet dreams." "Good night, Riley," she replied, reluctantly withdrawing her hand and stepping inside. She watched from the window as he walked away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Only then did she allow herself to acknowledge the truth that had been growing in her heart since that first night in Medicine Bow. She was falling in love with Riley Donovan. The week, until the dance, stretched endlessly before Olivia. She threw herself into her work, assisting Mrs. Winters with the children during the afternoons and managing the store's books in the mornings. The routine helped ground her, giving structure to days that might otherwise have been filled with anxious anticipation. Silver Creek was beginning to feel like home, its rhythms becoming familiar, its people becoming friends rather than strangers. Mrs. Palmer treated her like a daughter, fussing over her meals and offering motherly advice. Mrs. Garcia kept her supplied with baked goods and town gossip. Even prickly Mrs. Winters had warmed to her, grudgingly admitting that Olivia had a natural way with the children. The only shadow on her contentment was the knowledge that her father might still be looking for her. Each time the stage arrived from the east, she tensed, half expecting Harold Blackburn or her father's men to step down, demanding her return. But as weeks passed with no sign of pursuit, she began to hope that perhaps they had given up, accepting that she had made her choice. On the Friday before the dance, Mrs. Garcia burst into the general store, her round face flushed with excitement. "Olivia, the most wonderful news," she exclaimed, heedless of the other customers. "Riley Donovan just rode into town, and he's asked if you might join him for dinner tonight." Olivia's heart leaped, but she maintained her composure, aware of the curious glances from the women selecting fabric nearby. "That's very kind of him," she said carefully. "Where is he now?" "At the blacksmith's, getting copper reshod. He said he'd come by the store when he's finished." Mrs. Garcia's eyes twinkled. "I told him you'd be delighted, of course, Mrs. Garcia." Olivia scolded gently, though she couldn't suppress her smile. You shouldn't speak for me. Pa, as if you'd say no. The man rode 15 miles just to see you a day early. The older woman nudged her conspiratorially. He's smitten, that one. I've known Riley Donovan for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks, but before she could respond, the bell above the door jangled, and Riley himself walked in, looking slightly embarrassed to find Mrs. Garcia already there. Miss Owens, he greeted her, shooting a reproachful glance at Mrs. Garcia. I see news travels as fast as ever in Silver Creek. Mrs. Garcia merely laughed. I'll leave you two to make your arrangements, she said, heading for the door. Dinner will be ready whenever you arrive. When she had gone, Riley shook his head ruefully. I'd hoped to ask you myself, but I should have known better than to mention my plans to Elena Garcia. Olivia couldn't help but laugh. It's all right, I'm very glad you're here. The warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. So you'll have dinner with me tonight? Yes, she said simply. I'd like that very much. That evening found them once again at a quiet corner table in the hotel restaurant, enjoying Mrs. Garcia's excellent cooking and each other's company. Riley had news from the ranch: a successful roundup, new calves thriving, plans for expanding the herd in the fall. Dave's pleased with my work, he told her. He's raised my wages, which means I'll reach my goal sooner than I expected. By next spring, I might have enough for that parcel of land. That's wonderful, Riley, Olivia said sincerely. You're making your dream come true. He looked at her intently. And what about your dreams, Olivia? Are you still happy here in Silver Creek? She considered the question seriously. Yes, she finally said. More than happy, I feel useful. Valued for my skills rather than just as a potential wife. The children at the school are a joy, and I've made real friends here. She smiled at him. And there's this cowboy who comes to town occasionally who makes me smile. Riley's face lit up at her teasing words. Is that so? He must be a fortunate man to have caught your attention. I'm the fortunate one, Olivia said softly, no longer teasing. He rescued me when I had nowhere to turn. He really saw me when most people looked right through me. Riley reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Olivia, he began, his voice husky with emotion, but he was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Garcia with their dessert. The moment passed, but the connection between them had deepened, an understanding flowing beneath their casual conversation for the rest of the meal. Afterward, they walked slowly through town, eventually finding themselves on the small bridge that crossed Silver Creek. They stood side by side, watching the water flow beneath them, stars reflected in its surface. I've been thinking about that night in Medicine Bow, Riley said suddenly. About what might have happened if I hadn't been there, Olivia shuddered. I try not to think about that. My father would have forced me to marry Blackburn, I'm certain of it. You could have ended up trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who saw you as property rather than a partner. Riley's voice was tight with anger. It happens too often out here where women have few choices. But it didn't happen, Olivia reminded him, touching his arm gently. Because of you. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Not because of me, Olivia. Because of your courage, you were willing to walk away from everything you knew rather than compromise on something so important. It didn't feel like courage at the time, she admitted. It felt like desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. Riley took both her hands in his. I admire you, Olivia Owens. Your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, the way you've made a place for yourself here, won everyone's respect. He took a deep breath. And I find myself thinking about you all the time when I'm at the ranch. Wondering what you're doing, if you're happy, if you might ever think of me as more than the cowboy who helped you once. Olivia's heart raced at his words. Riley, she whispered, I think of you as so much more than that. Something changed in his eyes, a hunger mingled with tenderness. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Olivia responded, rising on her toes to press closer, his arms went around her waist, holding her as if she were precious and fragile. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Riley rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the first night in the line shack, he confessed. Olivia laughed softly. I might have let you even then." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes, his expression growing serious again. "Olivia, I know it's soon we've known each other barely a month, but I need to say this. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I started falling that very first night in Medicine Bow when you stood up to your father despite having nowhere to go." Joy bloomed in Olivia's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "I'm falling in love with you too, Riley Donovan. Maybe I also started that first night when you risked everything to help a stranger." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands cradling her face as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Olivia melted into him, feeling as if she had finally found her home not in a place, but in a person. The sound of approaching footsteps made them reluctantly separate. The night watchman tipped his hat as he passed, pretending not to notice their flushed faces and slightly disheveled appearance. "I should get you back to the boarding house," Riley said regretfully. "Mrs. Palmer will have my hide if I keep you out past curfew." They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, both glowing with the newness of declared feelings. At the boarding house door, Riley kissed her once more, a promise in the gentle press of his lips. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "The dance." "Tomorrow," Olivia agreed, reluctantly slipping inside. She fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, her dreams filled with Riley's kisses and the future that suddenly seemed possible. The community hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers for the dance, the wooden floor polished to a shine. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes as couples whirled around the room, their laughter and conversation creating a festive atmosphere. Olivia arrived with Mrs. Palmer, wearing her best dress, a new blue gingham she had splurged on after receiving her first full salary. She had styled her hair more elaborately than usual, pinning it up with her mother's hairpins and allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. Her eyes found Riley immediately. He stood with Dave Daniels and some other ranch hands near the refreshment table, looking impossibly handsome in a clean white shirt and dark vest. When he saw her, his whole face lit up, and he excused himself from his companions to cross the room to her side. "You are the most beautiful woman here," he said simply, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. Olivia blushed at the open admiration in his gaze. "You're not so bad yourself, Cowboy." The band struck up a waltz, and Riley led her onto the dance floor, his hand warm and steady at her waist. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years, finding a natural rhythm that had other couples watching appreciatively. "You dance well for a cowboy," Olivia teased as he guided her through a turn. Riley grinned. "My mother insisted all her sons learn. Said no son of hers would embarrass a lady on a dance floor." "I'm grateful to her wisdom," Olivia replied, enjoying the strength of his arms around her, the grace with which he moved despite his size. As promised, Olivia danced every dance with Riley, ignoring the raised eyebrows and knowing smiles their exclusive attention generated. Let them talk, she thought. For once in her life, she was following her heart rather than convention. During a break in the music, Dave Daniels approached them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "So this is the famous Miss Owens," he said, extending his hand. "Riley hasn't stopped talking about you since he rode back to the ranch after bringing you to town. It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman who's turned my best hand into a lovesick calf." "Dave," Riley groaned, looking mortified. Olivia laughed, immediately liking Dave's straightforward manner. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Daniels. And I hope Riley's work hasn't suffered too badly on my account. Call me Dave, please, and know, if anything, he works harder than ever. Says he's saving for something important." Dave winked at her. "Can't imagine what that might be." Before Riley could respond, a commotion at the entrance to the hall caught everyone's attention. A man had burst through the doors, looking around frantically until his eyes locked on Olivia. It was Jimmy Parker, one of the hands from the Double D who had stayed behind during the dance to watch the ranch. "Riley," he called, pushing through the crowd. "Riley, you need to come quick. Riders heading for town looked like trouble." Riley tensed beside Olivia. "What kind of trouble, Jimmy?" "6 men, heavily armed. I overheard them talking when they stopped at the creek. They're looking for a woman named Olivia Owens, said something about bringing her back to Medicine Bow." Olivia's blood ran cold. Harold Blackburn had found her. Riley's arm went protectively around her waist. When did you see them? About 30 minutes ago. They should be reaching town any minute now. Jimmy looked apologetically at Olivia. Sorry, miss, I rode as fast as I could when I heard your name. Dave Daniels stepped forward. Riley, take Miss Owens out the back, get to the ranch. Jimmy, go find Sheriff Matthews. Tell him what's happening. The music had stopped and everyone was staring at them. Olivia felt paralyzed with fear, the happiness of moments ago shattered by the prospect of being dragged back to Medicine Bow and forced to marry Blackburn. Riley's voice cut through her panic. Olivia, he said firmly, taking her hands, look at me. I won't let them take you. Do you understand? I won't let them take you. She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. What do? We leave now, head for the Double D. It's defensible, and Dave's men will stand with us if it comes to that. He looked to Dave for confirmation. Dave nodded grimly. Every last one of them. Miss Owens is one of ours now. The declaration warmed Olivia despite her fear. One of ours. She had found not just a home in Silver Creek, but a community who would protect her. Let's go, Riley said, leading her toward the back door of the hall. They had just stepped outside when the sound of galloping horses filled the night air, followed by shouts as riders entered the main street of Silver Creek. Too late, Riley muttered. They're already here. We need to hide you somewhere until the sheriff can sort this out. But where could she hide in a town this small? Every building would be searched if Blackburn was determined enough, and he clearly was if he'd tracked her all the way from Medicine Bow. The church, Olivia suggested suddenly. It's dark, and Reverend Hayes keeps the back door unlocked for those seeking sanctuary. Riley nodded, and they ran through the shadows, avoiding the main street where voices were now raised in argument. They reached the small white church at the edge of town and slipped inside through the back door, finding themselves in the dark, silent sanctuary. We'll wait here, Riley whispered, leading her to a pew near the front. Dave will send the sheriff as soon as possible. Olivia sank onto the hard wooden seat, trembling with reaction now that they had reached temporary safety. I can't go back, Riley, she whispered. I can't marry him. I'd rather die. Riley knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Listen to me, Olivia. No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go. Silver Creek protects its own, and you're one of us now. But what right do I have to put everyone in danger? Blackburn is a powerful man with many connections. He could make trouble for the whole town. The town can handle itself, Riley assured her. And Blackburn has no legal right to you. You're an adult woman who chose to leave of her own free will. He can't force you to return. My father might have other ideas, Olivia said bitterly. He's probably convinced everyone I was kidnapped or coerced. Before Riley could respond, the church door banged open, and harsh lamplight spilled into the sanctuary. Harold Blackburn stood framed in the doorway, his bulky silhouette unmistakable. Behind him loomed several armed men, and to Olivia's horror, her father. There she is, James Owens cried, pointing a trembling finger at Olivia. There's my poor, deceived daughter. Riley stood, placing himself between Olivia and the men. Mr. Owens, he said calmly. Mr. Blackburn. This is a house of God. I suggest you leave your weapons outside and discuss this civilly. Blackburn sneered, stepping into the church with his gun still holstered but prominently visible. I don't know who you are, mister, but you're interfering in a family matter. The girl belongs in Medicine Bow with her father and her intended husband. I belong nowhere but where I choose to be, Olivia declared, rising to stand beside Riley. Her fear was giving way to anger now. And I choose not to be with you, Mr. Blackburn. I made that perfectly clear a month ago. Her father pushed past Blackburn, his face contorted with a mixture of relief and anger. Olivia, stop this foolishness. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? The entire town thinks you were abducted by this drifter. I wasn't abducted, Olivia said firmly. I left of my own free will after you tried to force me to marry a man 3 times my age against my wishes. He's one of the wealthiest men in the territory, James Owens exploded. He could give you everything, security, position, a fine home. Everything except love and respect, Olivia countered. Everything except the right to make my own choices. Blackburn stepped forward, his expression calculated. Now, Olivia, there's no need for dramatics. I understand you were frightened and confused. A young woman's nerves can be delicate. But I've come all this way to bring you home where you belong. His condescending tone made Olivia's skin crawl. This is my home now, she said clearly. I have a position as a teacher and bookkeeper. I have friends who value me for my mind and abilities, not as a commodity to be traded. You've been filling her head with nonsense, James accused Riley. She was a dutiful daughter before you came along. A dutiful daughter who was miserable, Olivia retorted. Who was never asked what she wanted, who was treated as property to be bartered away to settle your debts. Her father flinched as if she'd struck him. That's not true, isn't it? Wasn't part of the marriage agreement that Mr. Blackburn would forgive your gambling debts and invest in the mercantile? Don't lie to me, father. I kept the books, remember? I knew exactly how much trouble you were in. James Owens had the grace to look ashamed, but Blackburn's face hardened. Enough of this, he snapped. You're coming back to Medicine Bow, girl, whether you like it or not. I've paid good money for the privilege of making you my wife, and I mean to have what I paid for. Riley's posture shifted subtly, and Olivia could feel the tension radiating from him. Mr. Blackburn, he said quietly, dangerously. Miss Owens is not for sale. She's made her choice clear, and if you were any kind of gentleman, you'd respect it. And who are you to tell me what to do? Blackburn demanded. Some saddled tramp who thinks he can steal another man's woman. I didn't steal anyone, Riley replied evenly. Olivia left of her own accord. She's built a life here, earned the respect of everyone in town. If you try to take her against her will, you'll have all of Silver Creek to deal with. As if to punctuate his words, the church door opened again, and Sheriff Matthews entered, followed by Dave Daniels and several other men from the dance. What's going on here? The sheriff demanded, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Sheriff, thank goodness, Blackburn said smoothly. We've come to retrieve my fiancée who was lured away from home by this man. Is that right, Miss Owens? Sheriff Matthews asked, looking directly at Olivia. Were you lured away against your will? No, Sheriff, Olivia said firmly. I left Medicine Bow voluntarily after my father tried to force me to marry Mr. Blackburn. Mr. Donovan helped me when I had nowhere to go, but I came here of my own free choice. The sheriff nodded. That's what I thought. Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Owens, I'm afraid you have no legal right to force Miss Owens to return with you. She's of age and has committed no crime. This is outrageous, Blackburn spluttered. She was promised to me. We had an agreement. An agreement I never consented to, Olivia pointed out. James Owens stepped forward, his expression suddenly pleading. Olivia, please, come home. Your mother would be heartbroken to see you living like this, in a strange town with strange people. The mention of her mother was a low blow, and Olivia felt tears sting her eyes. Mother taught me to be true to myself, she said softly. She would understand, even if you don't. For a long moment, her father stared at her, something like recognition dawning in his eyes. You really won't come back, will you? You really mean to stay here? Yes, father, I've found happiness here, real happiness. James Owens seemed to age before her eyes, his shoulders sagging in defeat. I see. This is ridiculous, Blackburn exploded. I didn't ride all this way to go back empty-handed. The girl was promised to me and I mean to have her. He reached for his gun, but Sheriff Matthews was faster. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Blackburn, he warned, his own weapon already drawn. You're outnumbered and in the wrong. Best to accept it and ride out while you still can. Blackburn glared at them all, his face red with fury. This isn't over, he snarled. No one makes a fool of Harold Blackburn, no one. He jabbed a finger at Olivia. You'll regret this, girl, mark my words. The only thing I would regret is marrying a man who sees me as property, Olivia replied steadily. Goodbye, Mr. Blackburn. With a final glare, Blackburn stormed out of the church, his men following reluctantly after exchanging uncertain glances. James Owens remained, looking lost and suddenly old. Olivia, he said softly, is there truly no chance you'll come home? Olivia's heart softened slightly at the genuine pain in his voice. This is my home now, father, but perhaps someday we could write to each other, start again. He nodded slowly. I would like that. He glanced at Riley, standing protectively beside Olivia. You'll take care of her, Riley looked to Olivia, a question in his eyes. She smiled and took his hand, answering for both of them. We'll take care of each other. James Owens studied their joined hands, then nodded again. Very well. He turned to go, then hesitated. Your mother would have been proud of you, Olivia. She always said you had her spirit. With that, he followed Blackburn out into the night. The sheriff cleared his throat. I'll make sure they leave town peacefully, he said. You two stay here until I send word. After the sheriff and the others had gone, Riley turned to Olivia, his face solemn in the dim light of the church. Did you mean that? He asked quietly. About us taking care of each other. Olivia nodded. I did, if that's what you want to. Riley took both her hands in his. Olivia Owens, since the moment I saw you standing alone outside that saloon in Medicine Bow, something in me recognized something in you. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. He took a deep breath. When you refused to marry Blackburn, your father cast you out. And though I didn't say it aloud then, I wanted to tell you to choose me instead. To let me be the one to love you, respect you, build a life with you. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at his words. Riley. I know it's soon, he continued. I know we're still getting to know each other, but after tonight, after seeing how close I came to losing you, I can't wait any longer to tell you what's in my heart. He cupped her face gently. I love you, Olivia. Not as something to possess or control, but as an equal to walk beside. When I save enough for that land on the Double D, I want to build a home there for us both. Yes, Olivia whispered, her heart so full she could barely speak. Yes, Riley, I love you too. I choose you not because I have to, but because I want to, with all my heart. He kissed her then, in the quiet sanctuary of the church, a kiss that felt like a vow, a promise of the future they would build together. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. Is that a proper proposal, Riley Donovan? Olivia teased gently. Riley laughed, dropping to one knee before her. Olivia Owens, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Not today, not tomorrow, but when we're ready, when I have a home worthy of you, when we've had time to be sure. Olivia pulled him to his feet. The only thing I'm sure of is that I love you and I want to spend my life with you. The when and how don't matter to me. Is that a yes? Riley asked, his eyes hopeful. Yes, Olivia said simply. 1,000 times yes. The next morning, the entire town knew of the confrontation at the church and of Riley and Olivia's engagement. Mrs. Garcia was beside herself with joy, declaring that she'd known from the first moment she saw them together that they were meant for each other. Mrs. Palmer sniffed that it was rather sudden, but conceded that anyone could see they were well matched. Even Mrs. Winters offered grudging congratulations, though she extracted a promise from Olivia to finish out the school year regardless of when the wedding took place. Harold Blackburn and his men had left town before dawn, but not before Blackburn had made vague threats against Riley that the sheriff didn't take seriously. James Owens had remained behind, taking a room at the hotel. He had asked to speak with Olivia alone before he returned to Medicine Bow. They met in the hotel parlor, an awkward silence stretching between them until James finally spoke. I was wrong, he said simply. About Blackburn, about what was best for you. Your mother would be deeply disappointed in me. Why did you do it, Father? Olivia asked quietly. Why were you so determined to see me marry him? James sighed heavily. The mercantile is failing, has been for years. I've been borrowing to keep it afloat, and the debt's mounted. Blackburn offered a way out. He would clear the debts, invest in the business, make it profitable again. All he wanted in return was you. All he wanted was me, Olivia repeated flatly, as if I were inventory to be sold off. I didn't see it that way at the time, James admitted. I told myself it was a good match, that you'd be secure, that it was what any father would want for his daughter. He met her eyes directly for the first time. I was wrong, Olivia, and I'm sorry. The apology, so unexpected, melted something in Olivia's heart. What will you do now about the mercantile? Sell it, James said with a shrug. Start fresh somewhere else, perhaps. I'm not as young as I once was, but I still have some years of work in me. Olivia hesitated, then said, You could stay here, in Silver Creek. The general store is looking for a manager. Mr. Miller wants to retire next year with your experience. James looked startled. You would want me here, after everything? I don't know, Olivia admitted honestly. But I think I think I'd like the chance to find out if we could have a better relationship than we did before, if you're willing to see me as I am, not as you wish I would be." "I would like that very much," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I would like to get to know the young man you've chosen. He seems honorable." "He is," Olivia assured him. "The most honorable man I've ever known." When her father left the next day, it was with a promise to consider her suggestion about the store and to write to her regularly. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was a beginning, and for now, that was enough. The months that followed were the happiest of Olivia's life. She continued teaching alongside Mrs. Winters, gradually taking on more responsibility as the older woman prepared for retirement. Riley divided his time between the Double D and Silver Creek, riding into town whenever he could to spend time with Olivia. Their courtship blossomed under the approving eyes of the townspeople, who had embraced their romance as a local success story. By Christmas, Riley had saved enough for a down payment on the parcel of land Dave had promised him. It was 15 acres of prime grazing land with a year-round spring, just as he'd described to Olivia. Together, they rode out to see it on a crisp December afternoon, the ground covered in a light dusting of snow. "What do you think?" Riley asked anxiously as they stood on a small rise overlooking the property. "I know it's not much yet, just land, but I've drawn up plans for the house. It would be here, facing east to catch the morning sun, with a porch wrapping around 3 sides. The barn would be just there, sheltered from the north wind by those trees." Olivia could see it all as he described it: the house, the barn, cattle grazing on the slopes, children playing in the yard. Their future, waiting to be built with their own hands. "It's perfect," she said, leaning against him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "When do we start building?" "As soon as the ground thaws in spring," Riley said. "Dave's offered to help and so have most of the hands. We could be in by summer if all goes well." "And then?" Olivia asked, tilting her face up to his. Riley smiled down at her, his eyes full of promise. "And then, Olivia Owens, I'm going to marry you if you're still willing to have me." "Always," she assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Always and forever." They were married on a perfect June day in 1879, with the entire town of Silver Creek in attendance. The church was decorated with wildflowers, and Olivia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garcia and Mrs. Palmer had helped her make. Riley, standing at the altar in a new suit, looked at her with such love and pride that Olivia felt her heart might burst with happiness. James Owens, who had indeed moved to Silver Creek to take over management of the general store, walked his daughter down the aisle. Their relationship was still healing, still fragile in some ways, but he had made an effort to know her as she truly was, and she had made an effort to forgive. As she joined hands with Riley before Reverend Hayes, Olivia thought about the night she had fled Medicine Bow, terrified and alone. How close she had come to a life of misery. How one moment of courage, one refusal to accept what others had planned for her, had led her here to this perfect day, to this man who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. "I, Riley Donovan, take you, Olivia Owens, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Riley said, his voice strong and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Olivia repeated the vows, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice both in refusing Harold Blackburn and in choosing Riley Donovan instead. The house on the Double D was completed just in time for their wedding. A sturdy 2-story structure with the promised wrap-around porch and large windows to catch the light. It was simply furnished but comfortable, with a kitchen that was Olivia's pride and joy, and a small study filled with bookshelves for her growing collection. They moved in as husband and wife the day after their wedding, and that night, as they lay together in the stillness of their new home, Olivia whispered, "Do you remember what you said to me that night in the church? About wanting to tell me to choose you instead?" Riley nodded, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I remember. I did choose you," she said softly. "Not because I had to, but because you were exactly what my heart had been waiting for all along." "And I chose you," Riley replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. We chose each other, Olivia. That's what makes this so precious. In the years that followed, the Donovan ranch prospered. Riley proved to have a gift for breeding quality horses as well as cattle, and their stock became sought after throughout the territory. Olivia continued teaching until the arrival of their first child, a boy they named James David, after both their fathers. 2 years later, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, Michael and Emily. The house on the Double D echoed with children's laughter, with love and occasional disagreements, with the sounds of a family growing together. Olivia never regretted her decision to refuse the marriage her father had arranged, nor her impulse to flee into the unknown that fateful night. Harold Blackburn eventually married a banker's daughter from Cheyenne, and from all accounts, made her thoroughly miserable. James Owens remained in Silver Creek, gradually rebuilding his relationship with his daughter and becoming a doting grandfather to her children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Riley surprised Olivia with a gift, a silver locket, to replace the one she had brought from Medicine Bow, which had been lost during their hasty flight from the dance years before. "Open it," he urged as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard. Inside was a tiny painting of the two of them on their wedding day, their faces young and radiant with joy. "Turn it over," Riley said. Engraved on the back were the words, "She chose me instead." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked up at the man who had become not just her husband but her best friend, her partner in all things, the father of her children, the keeper of her heart. "Best choice I ever made," she whispered, leaning into his embrace as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson over the land they had built together, the life they had chosen. And as darkness fell and the stars emerged above their home, Riley Donovan held his wife close, marveling at how a moment of courage and compassion on a dusty street in Medicine Bow had led to this perfect happiness, a love story written not by others' expectations, but by their own brave hearts.